I was 12 when my parents told me to grow up and find my own way home. Then they drove away. We were 80 miles from home when Dad pulled into a gas station. I thought we were stopping for fuel. Instead, he pointed at the pavement and said, "Get out." I laughed because I thought he was joking. Mom wouldn't even look at me. "Your brother is tired of your attitude," she said. "Maybe being alone will teach you something." I grabbed the car door. Dad locked it. Then the car moved. I ran after them. I screamed their names until I couldn't breathe. They never stopped. I stood there with my backpack and $12 watching their taillights disappear. I called home from the cashier's phone. Mom answered. "Please come back." Her response was cold. "You wanted to act grown? Figure it out." Then she hung up. The cashier looked at me like he couldn't believe what he'd heard. He called the police. That night, I slept behind a dumpster because I was too scared to leave the station. A police officer found me the next morning. My parents told the police I had run away after an argument. I told them they had abandoned me. Nobody could make my parents admit it. My aunt took me in. She became my family. I never contacted my parents again. 16 years passed. Then my brother's wedding invitation arrived. I almost threw it away. But inside was a handwritten note from my mother. "Please come. There is something you deserve to know about that night." I read it twice. Then I noticed something strange. The handwriting wasn't only hers. There was a second sentence written underneath, and that sentence was from my father. "You were never supposed to remember what happened next." I stopped breathing, because suddenly I remembered. The memory came back slowly. I remembered the gas station, the dumpster, the police officer, but there was one detail I had buried for years. Before the police arrived, a black sedan had pulled into the station. An older man stepped out. He had watched me from across the parking lot. Then he walked toward my parents' car. I remembered my father getting out. They argued. I couldn't hear everything, but I remembered the man pointing at my father and saying, "You can't do this." My father shouted something back. Then the man walked toward me. He asked my name. I told him. He looked shocked. Then he said, "I'm sorry." I didn't understand why. He gave me a small business card and told me to keep it. I had forgotten what happened after that, until my mother's note brought it back. I called my brother. He answered immediately. "Are you coming?" "I don't know." I asked him about our parents. He became quiet. "They've been acting strange." "Why?" "They keep asking about you." Then he admitted something else. Dad had recently asked him to find an old family storage box, a box that belonged to Grandpa. My grandfather had died 2 years after I was abandoned. I asked my brother if he knew what was inside. "No." "Did Dad find it?" Another silence. "Yes." My heart started pounding. "What's in it?" "I don't know, but Dad looked terrified when he opened it." I asked him where the box was. He whispered, "At the wedding venue." That made no sense. Why would my father bring an old family box to his son's wedding? Unless the wedding invitation wasn't really an invitation. It was bait. And whatever was inside that box, my parents were desperate to get it before I did. I decided to attend the wedding, not because I wanted my parents back. I wanted answers. When I arrived, my brother met me outside. He looked nervous. "I need to show you something." He took me to a private room. The old wooden box was sitting on a table. My grandfather's name was carved into the lid. My brother said Dad had found it in storage and brought it here because he didn't want anyone else seeing it. I opened it. Inside were photographs, legal papers, and a small cassette recorder. My hands shook. There was a label on the tape. "For my granddaughter if she ever comes looking for the truth." My brother stared at me. "Should we play it?" I nodded. Grandpa's voice filled the room. "If you're hearing this, then your parents finally contacted you." I looked at my brother. He looked confused. Grandpa continued. "Your parents told everyone that you ran away." They lied. He explained that he had gone to the gas station the morning after I disappeared. The cashier had told him everything. The police report confirmed that I had been found alone. Grandpa had confronted my parents. They admitted leaving me there, but they begged him not to tell anyone. He refused. Then came the part that made my stomach drop. Grandpa said he had discovered that my father had been hiding something from the family. A financial account. Money that belonged to me. Money Grandpa had intended to protect for me. The recording ended with one final sentence. "They will come back when they need that money." My brother stared at me. "How much?" I didn't know. Then I opened the last envelope inside the box. There was a bank statement. The balance was large enough to change my life. But that wasn't what shocked me. The account had been accessed recently. Someone had already tried to withdraw the money, and the name on the authorization form was my father's. I stared at my father's name on the authorization form. My brother looked just as shocked. Can he legally do that? I don't know. We immediately called Grandpa's old attorney. The lawyer was still practicing, and after hearing my name, he asked me to come to his office. I brought every document from the box. He studied them carefully. Then he smiled. Your grandfather protected you very well. The account had been created in my name when I was 12. My parents had never owned it. They had only been temporary trustees, and there was one condition. They could access the money only for my education, medical needs, or basic living expenses before I turned 18. They had never used it for me. Instead, the lawyer discovered that my father had recently submitted a request to transfer the entire balance. He had claimed I had authorized it. I hadn't. The lawyer looked at me. Do you recognize this signature? I stared at the paper. It looked like mine, but it wasn't. Someone had copied my old school records and forged my signature. I felt sick. My parents hadn't invited me to the wedding to apologize. They wanted me to sign a statement confirming the transfer. That was why they needed me there. I asked the lawyer what would happen if I refused. He smiled. Then they have a serious problem. For the first time, I wasn't afraid. I asked him to prepare everything. Then I called my brother. Are you still getting married tomorrow? Yes. Good. Why? I looked at the documents. Because I'm coming to the wedding. But why? I smiled. Because your parents are expecting me to forgive them, and I'm going to give them exactly what they asked for. My brother sounded confused. What does that mean? It means I'm finally going to talk. At the wedding rehearsal, my parents cornered me. Mom hugged me before I could react. I'm so glad you came. I stepped back. Why did you invite me? She looked at Dad. We wanted to make things right. Dad handed me an envelope. Inside was a prepared statement. It said I had forgiven them for abandoning me. It also said I had agreed to let them manage the family trust. I looked at the paper. Then I laughed. You actually prepared my forgiveness in advance? Mom's face tightened. It's just paperwork. No, I handed it back. It's a confession. Dad became angry. You've always been difficult. I looked at him. You left me at 12. He lowered his voice. We thought you needed discipline. You left me 80 miles from home. You survived. That sentence told me everything. They still didn't understand. My brother had been standing nearby. He heard every word. That's what you think this is about? Dad looked at him. Stay out of it. My brother shook his head. No, he stepped beside me. She was 12. Mom started crying. We were struggling too. My brother answered quietly. Then why did you lie? Nobody spoke. I reached into my bag and placed Grandpa's documents on the table. Dad's face changed. He knew. Mom looked at the papers. Then she whispered, Where did you get those? Grandpa left them for me. Dad tried to grab them. My brother stopped him. Don't. For the first time, my parents looked afraid. Then my lawyer entered the room. He placed a folder in front of them. The attempted transfer has been reported. Dad's face went pale, but the biggest shock was still coming, because my lawyer had found something else. Something my parents had been hiding for 16 years. My lawyer opened the folder. Your father told the bank that his daughter had authorized the withdrawal. Dad immediately denied it. I never forged anything. The lawyer placed the authorization form beside Grandpa's original documents. The signature is false. Mom began crying. This is getting out of control. I looked at her. It got out of control 16 years ago. Then my brother asked the question none of us had asked. Why did you need the money? Dad stayed silent. My mother finally answered. Our business failed. Dad looked furious. She continued. We had debts. My brother stared at them. So you abandoned her, lied about it, and then came back for her money? Mom couldn't answer. I felt something strange. Not anger, not sadness, just relief. The truth was finally in the room. My lawyer told them the trust would remain untouched. He also told them that any future attempt to access it without my permission would be treated as fraud. Dad sat down. For the first time in my life, he looked old. He whispered, We didn't know what else to do. I answered calmly. You could have asked me. He looked at me. You wouldn't have helped. You're right. Everyone became silent. I wouldn't have helped you steal it. My brother looked down. Then he asked me if I still wanted to stay for the wedding. I smiled. Of course. The next day, my brother got married. My parents sat quietly in the back. They didn't make a scene. They didn't ask me for anything. And for the first time, I walked past them without feeling 12 years old. But after the ceremony, Dad approached me one last time. He handed me an old photograph. It was from the gas station. And on the back, Grandpa had written a message that changed how I remembered that night. I turned the photograph over. On the back, Grandpa had written, "I found her the next morning. She was still waiting for them." My eyes filled with tears. Then I noticed something else. A date. The date was the morning after my parents abandoned me. Grandpa had written that he drove 80 miles to find me, but when he reached the gas station, I was already gone. The cashier told him what happened. He told Grandpa that I had slept behind the dumpster. My grandfather searched the area anyway. He found the small blanket the police had given me. He kept it. I had never known. Dad watched me reading. "Your grandfather hated me after that." I looked at him. He had every reason to. Dad shook his head. "I wanted to go back." I stared at him. "Then why didn't you?" He didn't answer. Mom finally whispered, "We were ashamed." I almost laughed. "You were ashamed, so you left me there?" She started crying. "We thought you'd forgive us eventually." That was the first honest thing she'd said. I folded the photograph. "I did forgive you." Both of them looked surprised. "But forgiveness doesn't erase consequences." Dad nodded slowly. Then he said something I never expected. "I'm sorry." No excuses, no explanation, just those two words. I didn't hug him. I didn't tell him everything was fine. I simply said, "I believe you're sorry." Then I walked away. My brother was waiting outside. He smiled. "Are you okay?" I looked at the wedding hall. For 16 years, I had imagined confronting my parents. I thought it would feel powerful. Instead, it felt quiet. Because I finally understood I didn't need them to admit the truth anymore. I already knew it. And Grandpa had made sure I could prove it. After the wedding, I stopped thinking about the trust. The lawyer handled everything. The fraudulent withdrawal request was canceled. My parents were legally removed from any control over the account. The money remained mine, but I decided not to spend it on revenge. I used part of it to buy a small house. The rest went into investments and a scholarship fund for teenagers who had been abandoned by their families. I named the scholarship after Grandpa. My aunt cried when I told her. She said he would have been proud. My brother stayed close. He visited every few weeks. Eventually, we started talking about childhood memories. The good ones, the silly ones, the things we had forgotten. One evening, he asked me something. "Do you hate Mom and Dad?" I thought about it. "No. Do you forgive them?" "Yes." He looked surprised. "Then why don't you talk to them?" I smiled. "Because forgiveness doesn't mean I have to give them access to me." He nodded. That was the difference I had learned. My parents had wanted forgiveness because they thought it would erase what they did. But forgiveness was for me. It allowed me to stop carrying the anger. It didn't give them permission to rewrite history. Months later, Mom sent me a letter. She didn't ask for money. She didn't ask me to visit. She simply wrote that she hoped I was happy. I kept the letter. I never replied. Not because I was angry, because I had nothing left to say. The little girl behind that gas station had spent years wondering why she wasn't worth coming back for. Now I knew the truth. It was never about my worth. It was about their failure. And that realization changed everything. Years after the wedding, I drove past that old gas station. The building had changed. The dumpster was gone. The store had a new sign, but I remembered everything. The pavement where I had stood, the phone inside, the backpack on my shoulder, the feeling of watching my parents drive away. I parked and sat there for a while, then I realized something. My parents had told me to find my own way home. I had spent years thinking that meant finding my way back to them. It didn't. I had found my way home when my aunt opened her door. I found it when my brother finally learned the truth. I found it when Grandpa left me proof that I had never been the problem. And eventually, I found it inside myself. I never became the person my parents expected me to become. I became someone they could no longer control. My brother still calls me every Sunday. My aunt still complains that I don't visit enough. And Grandpa's old wooden box sits in my study. I keep the photograph inside it. Not because I want to remember being abandoned, because I want to remember that someone believed me. People sometimes ask whether I consider what happened revenge. Honestly, no. Revenge would have been destroying my parents. Instead, I built a life they couldn't take from me. I became successful without their help. I created a family without needing their approval, and I stopped waiting for an apology before allowing myself to be happy. The night they left me behind, I thought I was lost. 16 years later, I finally understood. They didn't leave me without a home. They left me the freedom to build one. And this time, I chose who came inside.